I've lived in New Jersey my entire life, and I know lots of interesting people. Artists, musicians, actors, business owners, and politicians. So my goal is to introduce some of the most interesting people who have ties to New Jersey. Either they live here, they work here, they went to school here, whatever tie I can think of. And yeah, maybe they're not so famous, even in New Jersey. But I'm going to change that because I'm Lucille Losapio, and this is Not So Famous in New Jersey. You know, sometimes you meet interesting people in unexpected situations. My guest today is Dean Santa, who I met through 23andMe. Dean is a guitarist, a vocalist, a composer, a lyricist, an engineer, among other things, like his actual career in the housing industry. But he's found time to create and perform some really interesting music. I'm sitting here with Dean Santa, and we are going to start out by just going over some general information about you as an artist. I mean, I know you're a singer, you're a songwriter, you're a guitar player, you're a music producer and an engineer. Which of these is the most central to your life as an artist?
You know, I never really consider myself a musician, singer, songwriter, artist, engineer. It's kind of a hobby. I'm really a real estate guy that's been doing real estate my whole life. I work for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development as a regional director. And I do have a passion for affordable housing and for real estate, bricks and mortar. But certainly I have a passion for music. And I started playing at 14 years old, played with some buddies from my neighborhood. We had a band. And then in 1984, I guess I was around 20, I left and started to play with a pop band called The Hope. We had some interest with Chrysalis Records and did a bunch of showcases. And then I hooked up with a guy by the name of Andy B. Bad, who had a record deal. He was a hip-hop artist, and he had a record deal with a really famous record producer called Arthur Baker, who wrote the song A-E-I-O-U, produced all kinds of people like Naked Eyes and Hall & Oates and Lou Reed, David Bowie. So we had a spec deal. We recorded a bunch of songs. He released a single. We had a song in a movie called Beach Street. Did some gigging and some touring. We did some track dates with Salt-N-Pepa.
Oh.
Yeah, which was a lot of fun. And we were kind of like an early version of the Beastie Boys.
Yeah.
It was definitely way ahead of his time. Me and Andy became really good friends. He passed a few years ago due to Parkinson's. And then I took about 15 years off, raised kids. I have 4 kids, 4 boys. I got the bug when I got divorced to start writing again. And I never looked back. And I built a studio in my home. I call it Heartland Studios. And I've been recording ever since. Recently released a 15-song record called A New Chapter.
Isn't it funny? We still call them records.
Right. Well, I do, for sure. Sometimes I call it an album. It's a record.
Yeah, but it's, yeah.
I didn't make any CDs. It's all digital. It's on 150 different streaming platforms. And it's basically a pop record. Every single song has a story behind it.
Your music seems to trend more toward ballads and love songs and like sentimental pieces.
And some inspirational stuff, too.
Right. So what influenced you to turn in that direction after where you came from?
Previous to this, I have a record out by a band called Kashmir that is a 6-song EP, and it's basically more kick-ass rock and roll. At some point, maybe I turned back to my faith, found a little bit of God in my life, and started to write more about things that I think impacted me and about my life, and it just became a little more spiritual. So There's certainly some ballads. There's a couple of upbeat songs. The title song, A New Chapter, my oldest son co-wrote the lyrics. We had just moved out of the house into an apartment, me and him, and my wife had custody of my 3 youngest kids. And we started to fiddle with this riff I had, and many years later I said, all right, I'm going to record this one, and it became the title of the album. Right, I always feel like there's a new chapter in my life, like there's something new happening, and that's kind of where we went with that.
Well, as you know, the name of my podcast is Not So Famous in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Besides being my cousin, what other ties do you have to New Jersey?
We always rented a beach house every summer. I had a long-term girlfriend that lived down here, and right not far from you in Homedale.
Oh.
And I also have worked in the New Jersey HUD office for 19 years.
Oh, well, there you go. You got cred now.
Prior to my regional job, I was the New Jersey director, just heading up New Jersey.
As a songwriter, you have to be able to both write the music and write the lyrics. Mm-hmm. And you do both, right?
Yep.
Which of those 2 roles are you more comfortable with, as a lyricist or as a composer?
I think I do both fairly equally. In most of the bands I'm in, I've always been a contributor, a strong contributor in writing songs. It's always nice to have the, John Lennon or the Paul McCartney as your, somebody who can complement your songs.
Yeah.
And it helps. But I've always been someone that, generally writes a lot of lyrics. So I do write my ideas down. I got a book on the side of my bed, or I'm using my iPhone. And then eventually you have some maybe chord pattern or some melody floating around in your head, and you're looking for lyrics, and all of a sudden magically an old lyric jumps off the page and says, oh wow, this fits the melody that's going on in my head, and you kind of tie them together.
Yeah. So who do you consider some of the best contemporary composers?
My favorite people, I'm a big Paul McCartney fan.
Yeah.
I think Paul's written some great stuff in his life. I was a big fan of The Who, also. Obviously, another one of my big favorites was Led Zeppelin. And Led Zeppelin kind of wrote as a band, which is very different than the Beatles and The Who.
Right.
Because, Pete wrote everything, and the Beatles they each wrote their own songs. And the interesting thing about it was Beatles, you really had 4 lead singers in that band. They were all good singers, and they all sang their own songs and fronted their own songs and had hit songs. The Beatles were a masterpiece of a band. They were my early favorites.
People tend to have their own style, but they're still heavily influenced by other musicians. Is there an artist that you think has influenced the way you play, the music that you write?
Early on, I was influenced a lot by the rock bands, Zeppelin, The Who, and Kiss. Kiss was a big one of my early favorites. And Aerosmith. I played a lot like Joe Perry and Ace Frehley. That's more my style of rock guitar playing. I was never, an Eddie Van Halen type of player. But as I got older, I started to listen to more adult contemporary like Carole King and Alison Krauss, and even early Phil Collins stuff that he did, which is very ballad orientated.
Right, yeah.
And he actually said something that I always remembered. Heartbreak is good for an album. Falling in love is good for a song.
Yeah.
As I got older, and another one, I listened to a lot of Keith Urban recently, Morgan Wade, lots of country stuff recently. So it's kind of like, I guess some of that has spilled into my influences. There's some country influences in my music. I love the Eagles too, which were very country oriented.
Yeah, I never kind of realized that the Eagles were country, because I'm not a country fan at all, but I do really like the Eagles.
Right. Well, they were like a crossover,
Yeah,
right?
like so a country rock.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And Leonard Skinner fell in that category too. I always gravitated towards catchy melodies and catchy lyrics. And even when the new wave craze came in, and the Cars and the Police and Joe Jackson.
Yeah, I like Joe Jackson.
Yeah, all of that stuff was so catchy. And that's kind of like where I guess those were all my influences came together as pop. I was writing rock stuff for a long time. I wrote a lot of pop stuff in the 80s too. And I love engineering, so I do engineering for other people and producing for other artists. I have produced other records for people, which I enjoy doing too, and putting my little influence into it, or sometimes playing on the records, singing on the records. So I've been involved in stuff like that also. I did a song called Call Your Angels, which all the proceeds went to Carl Beanie Foundation for Hurricane Sandy.
Don't be afraid. Go ahead and cry. Let it all out. Hold your head high. Call your angels to help you get by. In these desperate hours, in these desperate times.
I had 34 Staten Island musicians play on it and sing on it. It brought the music community together. A lot of guys that lost stuff. A good friend of mine lost his whole recording studio. And that was kind of the beginning of me really starting to write more faith-based music. And I got a 6, maybe 7-song EP I'm working on now, all acoustic. There's some stuff in there that's faith-based, but I've been working on a number of rock and roll tunes. I want to do a rock record again. Not about faith, not about God. Actually some of the songs are more about politics. There's a little bit of political stuff in there.
Have you ever seen that documentary, Some Kind of Monster? It's about Metallica.
Oh, okay. I think I did see it. The one
Yeah.
where they're making the record.
Yeah, and they have the shrink comes along with them on the tour.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's when you see a band like U2 has been together for years, and it's
Oh,
a
the
tribute
Stones.
because not
Yeah.
many bands can stay together.
No.
I always liked the band Oasis, which are two brothers, and they don't talk anymore. And there's another band, Jet, same thing, two brothers, and
Don't talk.
broke up and they can't get along. It's hard.
Yeah.
The music business is really, really rough on you as a person if you believe in yourself. And I have friends that have just been crushed by it.
Yeah.
And the guy Andy B. Bad, who I played with and had a record deal, it crushed his soul for sure.
Yeah.
He was, very bitter.
If you look at the numbers, if you just look at the numbers, how many people want to be career musicians?
Right.
And how many actually make it? I mean, how many Bruce Springsteens are there, or Princes, or
Right.
Madonnas? Very few. It's like the percentage is so
Yep.
infinitesimal. And if people understood that, maybe it would make a difference. I don't know.
And I think what you have is certain musicians believe they have the talent, and there are plenty of really talented people that never make it.
Yeah.
And that's what frustrates them. And then you look out there and you see some of these newer artists that you wonder how they made it.
And it's funny because people go, "Oh, cream always rises to the top."
Right.
No, it doesn't.
No, not in music.
No, a
Yeah.
lot of it is luck.
Yep, and
Being
looks and you've seen now there's been a series of people, and they're talented, that have made it because they did things that they tattooed their whole faces, or they, Lady Gaga in the beginning with the bizarre outfits.
But she's got a lot of talent.
Yes, so
Yeah.
does Jelly Roll and Post Malone, but I think that's how they get the attention is by
Right.
being...
And then you have to deliver.
Right, being outlandish, right.
Yeah,
And then if
yeah.
you can deliver, you can really... and Madonna was that way. Madonna was the original shock,
And she's been able to reinvent herself.
Yep. She never was a great singer, but, she was a
Right.
good performer, good show, and kept herself in the spotlight by having negative stuff about
Yeah.
her. And she said, if, no one's talking about you, no one's going to know who you are. But,
Right.
And I think that's been a frustration for some talented people. They feel like if I can't make it on my music, but, people are making it because they are in the spotlight for things they've done wrong.
Yeah. But even so, you get in the spotlight, but you have to deliver
You
after
have
that.
to deliver.
I think we all have a picture of ourselves and how we think other people see us.
Mm-hmm.
But often that image is not the same thing that people see us.
Right. Yeah, especially when you're in a band, right? You're in a band, you're popular.
Yeah.
My high school band was really popular. We all had long hair. It was 1979, and, we were cool looking, good looking, and knew how to rock. So they had this image of us as probably bigger than we really were. My singer always did a good job of that, even when we got the same high school band got back together in 2009. We recorded a record and released it. And we did a bunch of gigs. We played the Starland Ballroom a lot. We played the Stone Pony. We played in the city, Irving Plaza, Webster Hall, and the PlayStation Theater on 42nd Street. Opening up for some really big acts. I had some great shows. And my singer did one of his things was, let people think we're bigger than we really are.
Yeah.
Like we're a pro band. We really weren't. We didn't have a record label. We weren't signed. But that persona, never playing a bar, always playing in a big club on a stage with
Yeah.
lights and big sound systems, made people think that
You were bigger.
Yeah, we were bigger than we really were.
What is it about you that either people don't know or would be surprised to hear?
People that know me are surprised to hear that I've been a single father and raised 4 children for the last 18 years with no contact from their mother for the last 14 years.
Really?
Yeah. At one point, I had 3 kids in diapers, and my wife was in a rehab facility.
Oh.
I think that shocks people when
Yeah,
they realize, and
yeah.
especially when they meet my children and they see how well behaved they are and what good boys they are. They're
Yeah.
really surprised to find out that there was no mother in their lives. My mother was a very big
Yeah.
help, thank God. She was always there to help. And even my in-laws, I stayed very close with my in-laws, and they took the kids every other weekend. Which was a big help, just to give me some sanity. I went
Sure,
12
yeah.
days straight with them, and then, needed that break.
So many people will be like, "Oh, a baby! Oh, I've got." When I was growing up, I had to watch my brother and sisters, and my older sister, when she had babies, I had to watch her kids. So, like, to me, babies are work.
Yeah.
It's not like, ooh, a baby. And people say, oh, you want to hold a baby? No, I don't. Not that I dislike kids. I mean, I was an after-school counselor.
Right.
I really like doing it. But I don't get excited over babies.
I don't know if I mentioned you, I just became a grandfather.
I saw
so
that online. Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about that. But again, I feel the same way as you. My kid's like, why don't you come over and spend more time with us? I'm like,
Well, I'm a little busy.
when she's a little older, I may want to.
Yeah,
But right now,
yeah.
she's a baby, and all she's doing is, eating. And
Yeah, shit. Yeah.
I'm not about to start changing diapers. I did that already.
Do you prefer performing or being in the studio?
I love being in the studio. I love making music. I love listening to that first mix after you recorded some tracks. But performing is a real adrenaline rush, especially performing on a big stage in front of 2,000 people, which I've done often. There is a tremendous rush there. But it's over. When the gig is over, there's really nothing to show.
Right.
A couple of pictures. Recordings last forever.
Right.
And making a song is it's a form of art. You're making something.
Well, and it's lasting.
Yeah. So you really do need to gig to support your music. That's the hard part. Putting a band together to play some of my music would require a pretty big band. Who can afford to pay them?
Yeah.
Makes it difficult.
So a lot of musicians get pushed back from either their parents or their partner because it takes a lot of time away. How has being a musician impacted your relationships with other people and your non-musical career?
My children love it. They've always been supportive. So my parents were always supportive. My ex-wife, when I met her, I was playing in a band and she loved it. And she actually said to me that was one of the things that had attracted. But I think then I gave it up. Got married, had kids, and when I got back into it, I was going through a rough patch in my marriage. We wound up divorced. She didn't like it then.
Yeah.
And I did write some songs about her, Crazy About You, which was, a song that I wrote for her, telling her how much I loved her. And she...
Didn't quite do that.
No, well, she said I wrote it for. She thought I wrote it for someone else. I was like, that's ridiculous. And there was another song I wrote called "Can't Go On Like This," which was about
the next step in your marriage.
Yeah, it was saying I love you, baby. You drive me crazy. We can't go on like this. That's the chorus.
Yeah.
Then when the marriage was almost over and we were in divorce court, I wrote the song "Liar," which was about her. And
Did she like that one?
No, of course not. She didn't like that one. Certainly, life's experiences really contributed to my writing.
Yeah.
There's another song, Alive and Free.
That was after you were divorced?
Well, that was post-divorce, but it was really way after my divorce, real feelings about how tough life can be at times and the challenges you face, but you carry on. You persevere.
Yeah.
You need to, especially when you have kids and they're watching you, you need to really show that you're super dad. My dad spent the last 48 days of his life he spent in the hospital. And I went every night and I would sit there with him. And I wrote a song called Forever in My Heart. And I wrote the lyrics in the hospital. It took me 6 years to record it. And then I really couldn't sing it because it was just...
too emotional.
Yeah, too emotional. And I brought this girl, Samantha Frank, in, who really killed it. It's a song. It's dedicated to my dad and to anybody else that I lost in my life, which has been many. Some of my musician friends, too. One of them took his life. My friend who died from Parkinson's. Another one had cancer. My very close cousin on my father's side died of cancer. My brother-in-law died of cancer.
I go through my contact list, and I'm like, dead.
Yeah.
And like, I can't take them out.
Yeah, right.
I leave them in my contact list. Yeah. So, Dean, if you knew this was the last year of your life, what would you want to do?
That's a good
How would you
question.
spend it?
I definitely want to finish off recording some of the songs I've written. No, I'd have to get them done, get them released. Obviously spent a lot of time with my kids, my mother, And it's funny you said that because I do have a song called My Last Day. Obviously if I had a woman in my life, I'd want to spend it with her or and my boys.
Yeah.
But I'd have to pursue finishing recording. That would be in the agenda for sure. I went into college as a music major. There's times where I feel like I wish I would have pursued music at that level and not given up. You know, I had a music professor, Doc Shiani, who hated guitar players. And anybody who went to the College of Staten Island, they had a great music program, knew Doc hated guitar players. And it turned me off. It wound up good because I became a business major and fueled my career in real estate. But there were points where I wish that I would have really dug into the deep side of music.
Yeah.
So
here's my last question for you. What's more important to you, being well known as a musician or being well liked?
that's a good question. So I would think well liked is I've never really cared about whether I was known or liked, either or. I kind of just always went about my way doing what I do. When I was young, trying to make it, obviously, and back then you wanted people to like you more than anything, and you needed to be known. And now at this stage of my life, I don't do it for money, and I don't do it for any reason. I do it for myself. So I guess being well liked, and not just liked as a person,
But liked as a musician.
as an artist.
Yes, an artist.
Right, is more important than being well known. Because I'd like anybody who listens to my record to listen from the beginning to the end and then say, wow, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
I like that. And that's important. And, and I've had people reach out to me and, say things recently to me that were very nice about the record. People I don't know. I had a woman contact me and say that she can totally fall in love with me and my voice. And I was like, wow, okay.
How old are you now?
Yeah, I would say, wow, that's interesting.
Send a picture.
Yeah. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
So that was nice.
That
and,
is nice.
A lot of people do comment on my lyrics. I have a lot of people that mention that the lyrics are deep and they touch them. So, I did have somebody reach out to me about my song Red Balloon, about being in a movie. Somebody said it's a perfect movie theme, and I have, they're in the industry, and I don't want to say who's the actor, but it's a very well-known actress. And
We say actor now for women, too.
That's true. So, no, we'll see.
Yeah.
Right, the key would be, to get it to go viral.
Yeah.
Where everybody starts listening to it. And hopefully then they start listening to your other stuff.
Right, yeah.
Right, and, anything new I release thereafter. Yeah.
Well, Dean, thank you so much for making the trip here.
Yeah, I love it. I'm happy to be here.
Happy to talk to you.
Where else can you hear scintillating conversations with interesting people with ties to New Jersey except for here? You can't, and that's why you should subscribe and listen to every episode. And from now on, you'll be able to listen to Not So Famous in New Jersey every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks on Tuesday, I'll be posting either a brand new interview or one of my best of series. Stay tuned. I'm Lucille Osapio, and this is Not So Famous in New Jersey.